I haven't bought a pan in 19 years. There's a skillet hanging on a nail by my stove right now that belonged to my grandmother before it belonged to me. And before her, it belonged to a woman whose name I only know because it's scratched into the handle with a nail file. Verna, 1941. 85 years of frying eggs, searing meat, baking cornbread over an open fire when there was no other way to bake anything at all. 85 years, and the only thing wrong with it is that the handle gets a little hot if you forget the cloth. You have a drawer somewhere. Maybe it's under your stove. Maybe it's a cabinet you don't open in front of guests, full of pans that didn't make it. The good ones from your wedding registry. The ones the commercials promised would last forever. The ones with the coating that releases food like magic. You scraped at them gently, the way the box told you to. You used the plastic spatula. You hand-washed them like they were made of glass. And somewhere around the third year, maybe the fourth if you were careful, they started sticking anyway. Same eggs, same butter, same gentle hands. And somehow you were still scrubbing, still replacing, still buying. Stay with me to the end, because I'm going to give you the exact 3 things we did to a piece of iron that made it outlive the person who bought it. And one of those 3 things has nothing to do with the pan at all. I left an Old Order Amish community in Holmes County, Ohio, when I was a grown woman with my own children. And I want to tell you something that still surprises people when I say it out loud. We didn't think of cast iron as old-fashioned. We thought of the new pans, the ones our English neighbours bought at the discount store, as temporary. Disposable, dressed up to look permanent. We weren't avoiding convenience because we romanticised hardship. We avoided buying the same pan twice because nobody had money to throw at something that was built to fail. Tell me in the comments how old the oldest pan in your kitchen is right now. Not the prettiest one, the oldest one. I read every single comment, and I want to know if there's a number under 5. Here's the thing. Nobody in a kitchen aisle is going to tell you, because there's no profit in it for them. A coated pan is engineered with a lifespan. Not a flaw, a feature. The companies that make them know down to the year roughly how long that surface holds before the microscopic scratches let food underneath it. Before the seasoning. And yes, those pans have a kind of seasoning too. It's just chemical instead of organic. Starts to break down. There's a reason the warranty on most of those pans is shorter than the loan you took out for your car. Same pan, same flame, same hands. And somehow you're still losing ground every few years. Not because you failed, because the entire system was never built for you to win that particular fight. It was built for you to come back. There is no money in a woman who buys one skillet at 25 and is still using it at 70. There's a great deal of money in a woman who buys a new one every 3 years for the rest of her life. Nobody can sell you a monthly bill for a piece of seasoned iron, and that, more than anything else, is why you were never taught how to keep one. My mother kept her pans the same way her mother did, and I learned it standing on a wooden stool because I was too short to see over the stove edge. I want to be honest with you about something before I go further. I didn't understand any of it as a system when I was young. It was just how it was done. The way you don't explain to a child why the sun comes up. It wasn't until I left, until I stood in my first English kitchen holding a pan with a sticker still on the bottom, telling me not to use metal utensils on it, that I understood we'd been doing something other people had lost. There's a woman I knew growing up. I'll call her by the name everyone used, Aunt Ruth, though she wasn't blood kin to me, just the kind of woman every community has who ends up related to everybody through sheer usefulness. Ruth had a pan her own mother brought over from a farm sale sometime before the war. A deep, heavy skillet with a pour spout on each side, the surface so dark and so smooth it looked almost wet even when it was bone dry. I drove out to see that pan with my own eyes, years after I'd left, because I'd heard about it my whole life and never once held it. Ruth let me pick it up. It was heavier than I expected, and the bottom was so polished from decades of use that I could see a warped reflection of my own face in it. She told me without a trace of sentiment that it had never once been washed with soap. Not once in longer than I had been alive. That's the part that surprised me most. Not that the pan was old, but that the rule keeping it alive was so small. No soap. That was the whole secret she was willing to share, and it took me years afterward to understand everything that single rule was protecting. So let's get into the actual method, because the practice is the point, and I'm not going to dress it up with more words than it needs. The first habit is heat before fat. And I mean that exactly the way it sounds. You put the empty pan on the burner first, dry, nothing in it, and you let it sit there until it's properly hot. Hot enough that a drop of water flicked onto the surface dances and skitters instead of just sitting there hissing. Chemists call this the Leidenfrost point. Thirsty is the word we used for it growing up, because that's what the iron looks like right before you give it fat, like it's been waiting. Only once the pan reaches that point do you add your oil or your butter or your lard, and you let that heat for another moment before the food goes in. The reason this matters is simple. Cold iron is porous iron, and porous iron grabs onto whatever touches it. Hot iron has already sealed itself, and food slides instead of bonding. Most people do it backward. They put cold oil in a cold pan and turn the heat on underneath both at once. And then they wonder why their eggs welded themselves to the bottom. The second habit is salt instead of soap. After cooking, while the pan is still warm, not hot, just warm enough to be pleasant to the touch, you pour in a small amount of coarse salt, maybe 2 tablespoons for a medium skillet, and you scrub with a folded paper towel or a stiff brush. No water yet. The salt acts as a gentle abrasive, lifting off stuck bits of food without stripping away the layers of seasoning that took years to build. Once the surface is clean, you rinse with hot water only, no soap. Dry it immediately and completely. And this part is not optional, because iron left even slightly damp will rust within a day. We dried ours on the stove itself, setting it back on low heat for a minute or two until every trace of moisture was gone. The third habit is the whisper of oil, not the flood. After drying while the pan is still faintly warm, you take a cloth, an old one, kept just for this, and you wipe on the thinnest film of oil you can manage. Not a pour, not a puddle in the bottom that you tilt around. A whisper, barely visible, just enough to leave a faint sheen. Too much oil left sitting becomes sticky and gummy over time, and that gumminess is the single most common reason people think they've ruined their pan, when really they've just been overly generous with kindness it didn't need. Now, I want to be honest with you about the mistakes, because I made every one of them myself before I understood what was wrong. I scrubbed a pan raw with soap once, convinced I was being responsible, and stripped half a year of seasoning off in one afternoon. It took months of careful cooking to build back. I left a pan to air dry on the rack once, distracted by a sick child, and found a faint map of rust across the bottom by morning. I drowned a pan in oil after seasoning it, thinking more was safer, and ended up with a tacky surface that smoked and smelled strange for weeks afterward. And I once, in my early years away from home, put a beautiful old skillet straight into a dishwasher because a neighbour told me cast iron was indestructible. It survived. It was never quite the same pan again. If you are the kind of person who would rather learn a thing once and keep it for 30 years than learn it badly and keep buying it new, you already know what to do next. And I don't need to ask you twice. Come back, because next time I want to show you what we did with the fat itself, the part of this whole system nobody outside our community ever asks about. And it changes everything I just told you. Now I want to be honest with you about something else. Something that matters more than the steps themselves. This method is not for everyone, and anyone who tells you it is happens to be selling something. If you're cooking acidic foods constantly, tomato sauces, citrus marinades, vinegar-based dishes, iron alone will fight you, and you'll spend more time managing the metallic taste than enjoying your meal. That's not a flaw in you, it's a mismatch in materials. If you genuinely don't have 10 extra minutes after a meal to dry and oil a pan properly, you will end up with rust. And rust is not the end of the world, but it is real work to fix. And if convenience matters more to you right now than longevity, if you're in a season of life where survival is the only goal and a quick rinse under the tap is all you have time for, there's no shame in that. And a coated pan bought for a few years of hard use might genuinely serve you better than iron that needs patience you don't currently have. But here's the larger truth underneath all three habits, the thing I actually believe. There is good money in selling a woman a thing she has to keep buying. There is no money at all in teaching her how to make one thing last a lifetime. The companies that build pans with a built-in expiration date aren't doing anything illegal, and they aren't doing anything most of us would even call dishonest if you ask them directly. They're simply optimizing for a different outcome than the one you actually want. You want a pan that cooks. They want a customer who returns. Those two goals can look identical on a store shelf and still be pointing in opposite directions. Type the word iron in the comments if you've ever thrown away a pan that should have lasted you the rest of your life and didn't, because nobody ever told you the 3 small things that would have saved it. This weekend, I want you to do one thing. Go look at the oldest pan you own, coated or iron, doesn't matter which. Check the bottom. Look for the maker's stamp, the wear pattern, whatever story it's been quietly telling you. Then come back and tell me what you found. And tell me honestly whether it's a pan that's aging or one that's simply dying on a schedule somebody else decided for you. I told you at the start that this pan had been used since 1941, and I told you I'd give you something by the end I'd never seen written down in any book. Here it is, the 4th habit, the one almost nobody mentions because it isn't really a kitchen habit at all. Aunt Ruth never let anyone else clean that pan but her. Not her daughters, not her daughters-in-law, not me even when I offered. Not out of possessiveness, because she believed a pan learns the hands that care for it, learns the rhythm of how hot, how fast, how much fat, and a stranger's hands undo that rhythm a little every time. I don't know if there's anything scientific in that belief. I only know her pan, at the time I held it, was older than every coated skillet I have ever personally watched die in a landfill somewhere outside whatever town I happened to be living in. Waste nothing. And remember, the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just now starting to ask about again.